1, 2, 3, 4.
Filled with awe and fright, see Jurassic Right, bathed in amber light. See Jurassic Right, see Jurassic Right, right. See Jurassic Right, right. See Jurassic Right, right. See Jurassic Right, see Jurassic Right, see Jurassic Park.
Wow, I'm very excited to talk to my guest today. And I'm trying to, I feel like I was going to say perfect timing, but this isn't the podcast, so I can't do the cat puns. But I did just adopt 2 black cats and another cat, a tabby cat, their mama. But, I mean, this is something, and this is Stephen Ray Morrison, you're listening to See Jurassic Right. But yeah, I've always wanted 2 black cats. And, rest in peace, Penny Lane. And I didn't think I'd be ready to get more cats, but I feel like Ripley and Wendy, their names, came into my life, and I'm so glad they did. And now I feel like I get to join the Black Cat Club, and I feel a little witchier. So I'm very excited to have my guest. They're a writer, they're a witch. It's Celeste Mott.
Hello, it's me. I am a writer and a witch, and also a former black cat owner. But, you and I were talking years ago about me popping up on the Percast, and then the Percast is no more. But
yes.
I had a black diabetic cat for years and years, and he very sadly passed away from diabetes a couple of years ago. So yeah,
sweet baby.
It's a gnarly journey. I'm not going to say don't get a diabetic cat. It's very treatable, and it's an amazing journey to go on with your pet in many ways, but it's a hard one. That's a tough one.
Yeah, I know. And I didn't think I would get 3 cats at once, but here I am. And none of them have teeth except for Wendy, which you met, has 1 tooth and her tongue sticks out. And maybe I'll go grab them at some point to be on camera. But
you've got to get your Gigi into the frame.
Yes. Well, yeah. So we're here. Obviously, I don't know. Just you always being a presence you are always such a warm presence. And I feel like anytime we talk or anytime you post and make stuff, it always just kind of brightens my day. And I feel like I always learn a lot with you. But I mean, yeah, you're a witch. I feel like, especially in because we want to talk about 90s witch pop culture today, which again, it's one of those things where I'm like looking around and I'm like, wow, it's actually influenced my life more than I expected. And also I feel like just so much of today makes sense, like from our generation and like how we've infused it into our lives, even now. And I just have to say quickly, because I want to know your origin story, but I think is Practical Magic my new favorite movie of all time? Witches and Margaritas. Amazing? I had never seen it, but like it kind of like I watched it this morning and everything about it just makes so much sense. The vibe, Nicole Kidman, Sandra Bullock, the kind of community building aspect of it, the kind of vacillating between like spooky and mysterious and hilarious. And I don't know, it was
like warm and kind of like wholesome.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen it either, weirdly, like until quite recently. And I remember all my sort of witch adjacent friends were like, how were you born in 1986 and you didn't see Practical Magic ever? And I think the thing is, I can't remember exactly when that movie came out. I would have to look it up. You probably have a better idea than I do. 98.
Yeah.
I think because it's more of a grown-up movie, it's one of those movies that probably was pitched at like teens and early 20s people, I would guess. I was like a little too young in the 90s to have been like the target audience for Practical Magic. So it was just off my radar. And finally I got bullied into it last Halloween. I was like, all right, we're doing it. We're watching Practical Magic. And I was like, holy shit, how have I never seen this movie? This is beautiful. Like and especially now with the 90s nostalgia that's happening in the culture. I was like, oh, this is so cozy. I want to live in this house. Where are my like witch aunts? Like what's happening? I feel like I missed out on the like witch grandmother, witch aunt part of witchcraft, but it's a beautiful movie. I was telling my partner the other day, though, it's so funny that Sandra Bullock in that movie gets kind of coded character-wise as like the ugly sister, like she's like the plain one, and I'm like, oh, radiant goddess Sandra Bullock, okay, all right, the 1990s.
I know the first scene where they're adults, her and Nicole Kidman are adult sisters. like Nicole Kidman is just like the most like 90s hotness of like tiny glasses and like the thin strands of hair like around the face. And then Nicole Kidman shows up with these like big glasses to be like, I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's gorgeous. Like, that is such a gorgeous look. But yeah, like, and she's wearing like frumpy flannel, like
baggy stuff. But she, I feel like she was cast that way a lot in that era too, like right up until the 2000s. You think about Miss Congeniality, and the whole bit in that movie is like, oh, Sandra Bullock's such an oafish, like mannish woman. And again, you look at her and you're like, she's a stunning, like
conventionally attractive Hollywood goddess. Like, what are you people smoking?
Anyway, sidebar rant.
No, I had, because I recently had my dear friend, software engineer and inventor Stefanie on, because we talked about The Net, which is the other Sandra Bullock movie a couple years before this, where it is she's playing a very like autism coded, hacker. And like, again, just like adorned with all these things to be like, isn't she a weirdo? Like, she just stays inside on her computer all day and stares at a screen. And we're like, oh, like that. And like, I feel like I need to go through the entire Sandra Bullock catalog and just be like, need to write a piece about what insanity, aspired.
We really should. Do you remember the movie? This is so a tangent, but it's Sandra Bullock related. Do you remember While You Were Sleeping, the Sandra Bullock movie? Oh my God. Okay. So here's the thing. No one remembers this movie. My mother made me watch it like 97 times. She was obsessed with While You Were Sleeping. And I had forgotten it existed until a couple of years ago. I was, maybe last year, actually. I was at a holiday gathering with my partner's family. My partner's mom is the musician Kristen Hirsch. She was in Throwing Muses. And,
oh, wow. Oh, my God.
Yeah. Or she is in Throwing Muses, I should say. So we were talking, and she was like, have you ever seen this movie? She was like, it's about Sandra Bullock's in it. It's about a woman who gets head trauma, and there's sort of like a mind-reading time travel component. And I was like, wait, hang on. This sounds really familiar. And she said she called it, she said she had put it in this category of movies in her head called spinster core. She was like, it's spinster core movies. She was like, no one remembers they exist, but they always have some vaguely big Hollywood star who you forget they were ever in this shitty movie. She was like, but it's beautiful. It's such a good film. And she's totally spinster core. So we should, next episode, we'll do the Sandra Bullock catalog from the 90s and 2000s.
The stuff like this is just happening when we were a kid. And I just was always very curious. Like, I don't know. It's interesting. I think, like, as I was reading some articles about just like why witches had a resurgence. Cause like Kiki's Delivery Service came out in 89, but it came out in the US closer to 90, or it came out in the US in 97, which I feel like was to capitalize upon witches in pop culture, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Charmed, like, all that stuff, Witches of Eastwick. So for you growing up, was this the kind of thing that got you to where you are now? Or what was that journey to, how do you become a witch?
I think I've noticed that witchcraft gets a sort of like pop culture revitalization every like 10 to 15 years, I would say. And I think now, especially with the way that like trends cycle with the internet, like nothing is really ever forgotten now that we have the internet, I think it's just perpetually on trend. But certainly back then, you had the 1970s witchcraft boom when Wicca got big, and like it was kind of hippie adjacent. Everyone was doing their folklore revival and stuff like that. And then I would say it died out a little bit in the majority of the 80s. And then you have sort of this like late 80s, early 90s boom again. And certainly I think that was influential on me. I mean, my main thing that I remember from being a very small child is just a ton of children's books focused on witches. I grew up in the UK, so this is probably not super like US relevant, but there was a children's book series for little kids, picture books, called Meg and Mog, about like a little witch lady and her like cat, and it was Meg and Mog. And I was obsessed with Meg and Mog. It's solid. If you have children, anybody listening, go get Meg and Mog. It's A+ material. And then The Worst Witch was another series of books that I was really obsessed with as a little kid. And then of course it became a I think, made-for-TV movie with Tim Curry and Faiza Balk in, I want to say that was like 1989 or 1990, somewhere around there. So it was just always present, this sort of like witch archetype. And I don't think there was ever a time where I wasn't really, really compelled by that. And I get asked a lot, when I do interviews, like, well, why was that? Like, what was it that drew you to that? And I think I was just always a weird little guy. I was always just a spooky little kid. I was really scared by ghosts and the paranormal, but I don't remember ever thinking they weren't real. I think I was scared because I knew it was real. And that was very much just a part of my life experience from a very young age. And so I gravitated to this material about, I guess in a way, kind of like powerful women, like girls and women who were able to do these like fantastical things. I mean, even Matilda by Roald Dahl, right? It's not really witchy, but it kind of is, because it's about a little girl in shitty circumstances who discovers she has these incredible mental powers that she can use to kind of change her circumstances. So from there, it just continued. And then, of course, I was born in 86. So right when that big pop culture witch moment happened in the 90s, and we had The Craft and, like you said, Practical Magic and
Sabrina.
Witches of Eastwick. Sabrina, huge for me, huge, very influential. Yeah. And then, so I got fed that media consistently from age like 4 onward. And then I started hitting the big girl library and realizing that there were books about real witchcraft. And I was like, oh shit, people believe this stuff and it's actually real?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. And then that was the end of that, Here I am at 39.
Well, and that, I mean, I think that's so interesting, because I always feel like, and I talk to people on this podcast where there is this level of, these moments, like I talk about Jurassic Park being like this kind of awakening in a way for me at 6 years old, and kind of being a focal point or a fulcrum for like so many of my interests now, or things even later in life that I didn't realize, like, oh, I believe these things or think these things because this movie had such a, like, it permeated all through my life. But it is just like, how do you, again, sift through all the pop culture notions? Like this article I read, I wish I could, I'll find the link to it, but like this idea of, witches being an outsider status but ways of building community outside of the norm. Like, how do you go from like the pop culture part of it to like, this is an actual practice and a ritual? Or I guess, how is that for you? And like, how did you get there?
Yeah. I think you hit on something I think just so fascinating there, which is that idea of the outsider that can find community. And I think especially those books primarily when I was really little, but things like The Worst Witch, which, like, we're not going to say the name of the transphobe that we don't mention.
Yes.
The lady with the wizard school.
Yeah.
But she grifted a lot from The Worst Witch by Jill Murphy because
I didn't know this.
Controversy. Yeah. So Jill Murphy, I think, started writing The Worst Witch books in maybe even the late 70s. It was early on, so long predating She Who Must Not Be Named.
Yeah.
And it was about, an old girls' school for witches. It was like, you learn that you're a witch, and then you go to this witch school and you have misadventures and all of this kind of thing. And so the idea of being like the klutzy outsider or the neurodivergent weirdo, which was definitely the category that I was firmly in, who maybe didn't slip on the same banana skin or gel with the people in your real mundane life. The idea that there could be this space, right, where I could have access to by virtue of having something in me, something innate in me that I was just born with, but I just had to unlock it and have it recognized by other people and validated by community. And then I would have a community of people who maybe I wouldn't always get along with them. Maybe there would still be conflicts and weirdness and misadventures, but at least they were like my people. I think that was very compelling, and something that I definitely was seeking, especially when I got a little bit older and started having access to these like research books and nonfiction books about the history of, Western esotericism and the occult and spirituality. And I realized, like, oh no, there are groups of people who really, witch school's not real maybe in the way that I would like it to be, but it's something that I can find. But I was growing up at the time in Western Australia, in Perth in the 90s. And if anybody has ever been to Perth in the 1990s, they will know there's not a lot going on out there. Most isolated city in the world, literally holds that title. Completely surrounded by ocean on one side and like inhospitable, uninhabitable desert on the other. And so there wasn't a lot of stuff. I live in New Orleans now, and you can't leave the house without falling over an occultist or a witch shop, but that wasn't the case where I grew up. So the community that I was looking for wasn't really there still. There was like one witch shop. I had to catch a train for 40 minutes to get there, and it was run by like some weird old pagan guy from the 1970s who was like, do you want to come to our coven gathering? We work skyclad. And I was like, I'm 14.
Oh, dear.
Nope. That's
Stranger
terrifying.
danger.
Yeah, exactly. No, don't do that. So I didn't have the in-person community that I was looking for, but I found it on the internet, right?
Yeah.
As so many of us did when we were lonely, weird, neurodivergent kids in the 90s and the 2000s. And I think from there, just accessing the huge amount of information. I mean, even on the early internet, which is, as you know, not the internet of today by a long shot. Woo! But there was still so much, so many good resources, so much access to people who were older and wiser than me in some ways, and unhinged and dangerous in others. But I got the community I wanted in a sense, And then from there, it was just a case of I don't think there was like one defining moment of realizing, aha, I'm a witch now. But I think it was sort of the slow adoption of that as a label that I felt comfortable with, and just trying things out, trying out spells and rituals and practices, and getting my feet wet, reading increasingly convoluted esoteric books. I went to college eventually and got a degree in philosophy and comparative religion. So that was a part of that journey too. And then I moved here to New Orleans, and now I can't avoid the community.
Yeah.
sometimes wish I could.
I know. Yeah, I was telling you before we were recording. But yeah, I went to New Orleans in 2022, and it definitely for a wedding, and my dear friend Courtney James Clark, who's been on this podcast a few times, like going to the Pharmacy Museum and being in this space, and
cool.
I don't know, just that it's like, growing up in California, you don't feel, or at least I don't feel, even when I lived in the UK, where I'm living in a flat that's like older than the state that I live, grew up in, kind of, in New Orleans, it definitely has a tinge of that energy of like, it just, you feel like there's been people walking in before, like the paths that you're walking, like millions of people have walked in a way. If that makes sense.
It's a very energetically dense place for sure, especially in like certain pockets of the city. I live about 10 minutes outside of the French Quarter, so I'm not in the thick of that really historic, like, part of town. People kind of forget sometimes, especially not you, but like when people just come briefly to visit and they, they're in the French Quarter and then they're out of the French Quarter. This is just a normal place.
Yeah.
Question mark. So, you've got the suburbs, and you've got like the neighborhood I'm in was mostly built in the 1950s. It's a lot of like ranch houses, but I'm still so close to those parts of town that are really, really old, and where a lot of history went down, and a lot of that history, horrifying and not good.
Yeah.
And so there's a density to the energy here, and to the almost like to the air here, not helped by the oppressive humidity most of the year. And this is also a place where magic of various kinds and occult practices and, non-Abrahamic religious practices have existed for hundreds and hundreds of years. So there is really, it's so normalized. And I forget, sometimes I think to myself, maybe I'll move eventually, but it's kind of like, where would I go? Because I've adapted to being, I had cleaners over to my house the other day, and I made a video about it because it was funny, but they were, they were cleaning my house. And I had asked them if they would mind like cleaning the fridge and the freezer out. And I went and ran some errands while they were here. And I had this horrible like pit in my stomach drop where I was like, oh no, there are things in that freezer that they're probably not going to want to see. And I forgot, there's a series of jars in there. There's a dead snake. There's a dehydrated toad. And I came home, they'd pulled it all out, and it was all on my kitchen counter. And I was like, okay, well, it's out there now. Hopefully they come back.
I mean, maybe they're fascinated. Maybe they'll ask you about it. I don't know. And
they might also have just seen it all before at this point, living here. I don't know. But
yeah. No, it's interesting. I remember very clearly the last podcast on the left. I think it was maybe the Aleister Crowley series or something. Like it just hearing, like learning, like they kind of went through all the like historical and again, the more like 70s, 60s or 50s or like that era vibe of things. And I found that fascinating of like how you're talking about how like this is just a life you're living and it's all just like part of it. And like, is that something you feel like you've developed over time? And can people develop that, like being in touch with stuff? Or, I don't know. Is that something that is like part of your everyday kind of, I don't know, craft, I guess?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of different moving parts to it. And that the 1950s, 1960s, like, era of occultism is really fascinating too. Like people should listen to those last podcast episodes if they haven't, because it like that was a big pushback against that more rigid like 1950s like Christian values dominant society. And then you had people like not Aleister Crowley, he was Victorian era, but like you had people like Anton LaVey pushing back against that and doing essentially just doing the opposite to be contrary, but to be like, look, there's another way to live your life and you can live your life for yourself and you can be selfish and you don't have to embody these Christian values. There's this other path that you can take. But for me, I think the part of witchcraft that is more about, perhaps we could say like, I don't want to say like magical powers, but like connection or psychic sensitivity, or what you might call like innate ability. I do think that some people are born with a greater facility for those things for whatever reason, just in the same way as like some of us are born better at playing the violin or podcast engineering or, higher mathematics, whatever it might be. Yeah. So I think some of us are more naturally sensitive, but I think you can train it. That's a big part of my sort of platform where I teach people is like, look, everybody can do it. It's a human experience. It's a human sense. We're just kind of taught to tamp it down. But in terms of how it became just a part of my everyday, I mean, it certainly wasn't always. I still had to go. I mean, I wasn't born into a family that we were witchy in some ways. My mom's family is Irish Catholic going back God knows how long. And they're not going to like it when I say this, but the Catholics are very witchy a lot of the time. So I didn't, grow up with family members who were teaching me how to do stuff, really. But I did grow up very keyed in to spirituality and very keyed into these ideas. And again, the 90s being the incubator for that as well. And everybody had sun, moon, star shit and everywhere and burning incense and getting crystals. So making it a part of my life to the point where it became just routine, I think that probably happened after I moved here. And a big part of that was when it became my full-time job, Yeah. It's when you're in a point in time where your practice, your religious practice or your spiritual practice or your witchcraft practice is something that you only do on weekends or on holidays, that's still completely valid. And I would never say to somebody like, oh, you can't call yourself a witch if you're only doing it like X number of times a year. Like, of course you can. But the volume of practice, like there's not a day that goes by now that I'm not doing something because it's my job.
Yeah.
So at that point, it just becomes who you are, and it becomes very normal, and you forget that it's not normal. And then someone's like, what did you do for your work day? And you're like, oh, well, I talked to somebody about how they think they have a demon on them, and I bound the city of Philadelphia from developing this historic neighborhood that they're trying to bulldoze. And then I, did a uncrossing on a dog walker, and it's all very normal for me. But other people are like, oh, I don't know, I filed my taxes, but good for you, I guess. It's weird.
No, I love it so much. It's because I feel like, at least I feel like everyone we know, I don't know, it's like, I feel like it's, but because you learn, I don't know, like you're saying the Catholic thing where it is like, you realize that there is sort of whatever this kind of magic is or ritual, I feel like is just so infused and people don't even realize, like, and again, even that last podcast in the Left series where it's all these like JPL and like NASA scientists who are like engaging in this stuff. Like, I don't know. I find that really, do you find that people who come to you, like they come from all walks of life kind of thing?
Oh yeah, 100%. And yeah, exactly. Like this is the thing, not to put my like tinfoil conspiracy hat on too much, it's not going to fit over the headphones. So we can't do that. But it is everywhere. Like you look at history and we have presidents who have publicly consulted astrologers. We have, occultism threading its way through all sorts of different major political movements. And I mean, big tech, I would argue. I mean, I'm sure you see a lot of this living in California, but like tech bros love their esotericism and their occultism. They're not necessarily calling it that. They're trying to put this sort of scientific gloss on it where they're like, oh, that's not magic. That's this other thing. But it's like, wait, okay, all right. Is it?
I have my favorite term for this is I call them live, laugh, love bros. And it's obviously, it's a gender neutral term, but it's people who are like, if you just set your mind to it, then you can achieve anything you want. Like there's no such thing as depression or mental health. I'm running away from things that I cannot speak of. Like my big theory about CrossFit is every dude who's done CrossFit has probably killed their best friend in a drunk driving accident when they were 20 and they found God. And so I totally get what you mean of like, there's these systems in place that people have. I don't know. To me, like I personally got really into astrology during lockdown because I love the idea that the stars were in a very specific place when you were born. And that's just interesting. I don't know. You know what I mean? And how like the sky, over hundreds of millions and billions of years, the plate, everything is moving in relation to itself. So isn't that, I don't know. That's the thing that I find really fascinating.
100%. And I think like, even if you're in a boat where you don't let it run your life, I mean, I am an astrology believer. I am not an astrologer because I can't do math, but it befuddles me completely. I have people I go to for that, but I don't hinge my entire life on it, but I do incorporate it into my witchcraft practice. And I do think there's a lot of validity and, to answer your question, what kinds of people are into this? I mean, yeah, it is. It's tech bros. It's one of my favorite clients in the whole wide world. I love her to death. Obviously not going to say her name, but she's like an extremely, extremely successful, like gives speeches all over the world, OBGYN. Wow. Like she does emergency OBGYN surgery and she's like one of the preeminent OBGYNs in the country. And she comes to me for this stuff. And one of the first things we had a conversation about when we started working together, and I remember it was like very emotionally impactful for me, but she said, I don't know, we think we're doing a reading about something totally different. But then toward the end, she was like, is it normal that I can dream the future? And I was like, define normal. No, not normal, but do you want to talk about it? And, we had this series of wonderful conversations about how she could lean more into these gifts and her practice. And she was telling me that sometimes when she was in the room, doing a really heavy surgery, that she would feel like the spirits of the people that she was sort of working with. And yeah, we were able to work together in a way that she could lean into those abilities and use it to strengthen her mundane work out in the world as a scientist, right? As a doctor.
Yeah.
So it is, I had this conversation with someone just yesterday, actually, because sometimes I mention what my job is to normies, and they're like, but it's not just woo-woo Gwyneth Paltrow types who are knocking on my door. It's really everybody. I'm working with a firefighter right now too. Like it's truly everybody. So
no, that's so cool. I mean, and again, I like that's the part where I'm curious. What was it recently? Like seeing like podcasters portrayed in the media, and I'm just kind of like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? Like,
right? Yeah.
So it was cool to go back to like more of the 90s stuff, because I feel like, I don't know, it's cool to see. Again, I just feel like, because it was funny, because when I was like doing research, I was like, oh, I forgot that Blair Witch is also considered like a witch thing, even though, because to me, the other 90s stuff is so much more wholesome. And more in a weird way, like almost like coming from like a Gen X kind of spirit of like, isn't it cool that we get to be ourselves,
Absolutely.
Whereas Blair Witch is
Absolutely.
like, I was like, where does this fit in? I don't like it. This feels totally different.
It's kind of funny to think about, actually. Because I was also looking at lists of witch movies from like that period of time a couple of days ago, just to say, like, just kind of see if there was anything I had kind of missed in my personal education. And weirdly enough, I actually have never seen Blair Witch, because when it was out in theaters when I was younger, a preteen or a teenager, I was the biggest scaredy cat in the universe, and I was terrified of horror movies. My best friend was super into them, and she like had to staple me to a chair and make me watch The Ring when we were teenagers. She was like, "We're gonna do it." I was like, "No, I'm so scared." And now I love them, but I never saw Blair Witch for that reason, because all my friends at school were like, "Oh my God, it was terrifying," and I was like, "No, I will not sleep for weeks. I don't want to do that." So I missed out on that one. Of course, I know the story of it now, but I think you're right. I don't think there were that many movies in that period of time, not big kind of blockbusters anyway, that had that witch archetype as the villain. And then you look at the last 10 years, and there actually are a lot more movies that have that witchy character as at least a little dangerous, a little like scary, a little nebulously moral. I mean, Weapons, obviously.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Literally, Amy Madigan just won Best Supporting Actress for playing a witch. Like,
oh, so good. Oh man, I know we're not talking about contemporary movies right now, but I will ride for Weapons. I was so happy. I don't really care about the Oscars, but I was like, Amy Madigan, you earned the fuck out of that, girl. Good job.
No, that's a generational performance that, like, I mean, there's been plenty of Aunt Gladys's for Halloween. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, she has become part of the fabric of that.
And then, even though that is a modern movie, and it came out last year, I would argue that Weapons really rides that line of like 1990s horror, because it's doing that beautiful thing where it is legitimately quite scary in parts, or at least like, very well-timed jump scares that aren't overdone. But it's doing that almost early 1990s like horror comedy thing where like you gotta laugh because there's some funny shit going on in there. And as a witch, I found myself like, I'm not saying that we should have children in our basements. That's like that's not what I'm saying. Gotta be clear.
I'm not clipping this out for social media.
But there was part of me that was in a weird way kind of rooting for Aunt Gladys. I was like, she's just trying to live her life, man. She's just trying to stay young. Who amongst us has not experimented with Botox? And there was some things like, I think that's why people were dressing up as her for Halloween. There's something sort of like, there's a fondness that grows in you for the Aunt Gladys character, even though she's objectively evil.
Yeah.
But yeah, like aside from Blair Witch and The Witches, I guess, the Roald Dahl adaptation, there's not a lot of movies that were huge in the 90s and the 2000s that had that real like witches are evil across the board thing going on. The Craft, obviously, you have like the witchcraft can be dangerous conversation. Faiza Balk again doing the most in that movie. Love her. But yeah, it's more whimsical and it's more magical. And I think you make a really good point about the Gen X influence there of like, follow your spirit, discover your inner power. I mean, we got Hocus Pocus in the 90s too, right?
Same year as Jurassic Park, 1983.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and did you ever see the Olsen twins, Double Toil and Trouble?
Yes. I should have rewatched that for this, but like
we
could do a whole episode about that. Like that was, again, big classic. VHS. It just, I was like, if anyone is listening to this but I feel like, but the thing is, there's a lot of teens now who love VHS, so it's relevant again. But I feel like all the Olsen twin tapes were like big in my house with my sister and I.
That was a big one for me, actually, too, a really formative one, because I can't remember exactly what year that came out. I would have to Google it, but that was right on my age range. And I remember going to Blockbuster and just looking for anything that looked like it might be a little spooky and a little witchy, but not too scary, because I didn't want to scare myself.
Yeah.
And here we had this beautiful Halloween movie with the frickin' Olsen twins, icons of my childhood on the cover. And I watched that VHS tape to death. Like, I would get it out every single time we were at the store and just constantly watch it. I should have rewatched it too, because it's a big nostalgia trip. But that's a beautiful one. They're little witch girls, and they're mostly doing good things, and they're kind of like fighting the evil.
Yeah, I feel like I can think of, because isn't the bad person trapped in a mirror at the end?
Yes,
and it shatters. So. I can picture it in my head right now.
Yep, and I think like the main thing that sticks in my mind, the iconic memory of Double Toil and Trouble was like, I think they're friends with like a scarecrow or like a zombie guy. There's some like older tramp character, I feel like.
A real people Thackeray in the comments, Banks situation going on.
Yeah, that kind of thing happening. And then, and you've got Return to Oz, too, which is not a witch movie, but you've got Mombi in that, which was really scary.
I haven't
also Freeze a Bug. Freeze a Bug is. Have really you not seen Return to Oz?
No, it's. I'm a little terrified.
No, you got to do that. It's so good.
Well, wait, and so was last night the first time you watched Kiki's Delivery Service?
No, I had seen it, but I had seen it. I didn't see it as a child, though. That's not a childhood one for me. But I think I saw Kiki's. I went through a real Miyazaki kick in my early 20s, and I think that's when I saw Kiki's. But I hadn't rewatched it, and I shit you not, Stephen. I was on the couch last night eating my ramen bowl and watching Kiki's, and literally from the first 4 minutes in, the tears were just streaming down my face.
Oh, it's such a beautiful movie. I mean, I feel like maybe most people listening to this would have seen it. I mean, weirdly perfect timing with our conversation. They put it back out in theaters this past weekend.
Yeah.
In a 4K IMAX restoration. So a couple days ago, went to City Walk here in LA and watched it in IMAX. And it was just there's just something so, I mean, it's just like a person, again, in that way, how you were talking about this sort of, there's like an appeal to this idea of like knowing there's something inside you that is capable, and how this story says it's okay if things aren't perfect all the time is like something I really needed to hear recently, or I do need to hear it. Like, it's just, so it was hitting you in all the right places.
Oh my God, it really was. And I remember I was like halfway through watching it last night and I sent you a message and I was like, wait, is this entire story just about being neurodivergent? Like, is Kiki just massively autism coded and I missed this my entire life? And I really I texted my boyfriend about it too. I was like, that's what's happening. Because for people who haven't seen it or people who have, the entire plot is that she, it's a coming of age story, obviously, and she's off on her journey at 13 years old to go and do her apprentice, essentially, but not apprentice with someone who's going to teach her witchcraft because she has that at home. It's going out and being independent and discovering that you can, getting shivers. You can rely on your own gumption and skills and pull that outside of yourself and be a grown-up, basically. But halfway through the movie, she loses her ability to fly and she's terrified that she's going to, it's really sad. She's terrified she's going to,
she can't hear
and speak to her cat. She can't hear her cat. And she thinks she's not going to be able to do her job and she's going to get kicked out of the place she's staying. And it's like this really quite heavy themes. But I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, it's autistic burnout. Girl has burnout.
Yeah.
And then they make it pretty explicit because the other characters she's talking to, and of course it's a Miyazaki movie, so not that there aren't characters in that movie who are kind of unkind and cruel, but for the most part, the people she encounters are like, hey girl, it's okay.
Yeah.
Just drink some soup and relax about it. And, she learns how to reconnect to her power and ultimately she brings it back, in a situation of duress where she has to save a friend. Because again, that's very Miyazaki.
Yeah.
But I'm watching that and, being neurodivergent is definitely part of my lived experience. I also have a chronic illness. I'm also a full-time witch. And the tears are just streaming down my face. And I'm like, I also have burnout. Like, somebody feed me soup,
If only somebody could feed us soup. You don't have a big red bow, though. I feel like that's maybe not. I was like, I wonder what the thought process was of like all witches have to wear like a dark purplish black robe.
Yeah, and a big red bow.
Yeah.
I did go through in the 2010s a period of time of wearing giant bows. I think we all did in the hipster coded.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
What are the kids calling it today? Twee. We didn't call it twee back then.
Indie sleaze,
but I was doing
another version of it too.
Indie sleaze. Yeah, I thought I was a goth, but I look back at my like clubbing photos and I'm like, I mean, I was, musically speaking, a goth. I went to goth clubs, but I look at the fashion I was wearing and I was like, nope, that was a firm hipster indie sleaze moment that I was doing there.
Tumblr
core
aesthetic. Yeah, Tumblr core.
Mm-hmm. I did just buy, I don't have a bow, but I did just buy this like incredible crochet headscarf moment.
Ooh.
So I'm doing that.
Yeah.
I'm doing the babushka summer.
Babushka summer. Yes, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kiki, I mean, again, it's in my upper echelon Miyazaki. I mean, he's my favorite filmmaker. So
Really?
Any chance to talk Miyazaki.
What's your top? You like Mononoke? That's your top, right?
It's hard. Yeah, Mononoke is the very like, because I was like, Miyazaki comes in three camps. He's either, what do you call that? Like self-actualization adventure, political climate change thing, or like, was I a bad father? Like those are the three genres of Miyazaki. And sometimes they intertwine, And so, I mean, Princess Mononoke was my first. I mean, again, speaking of going to Blockbuster, and seeing that cover and being, so drawn to that. And then, but like, yeah, I think My Neighbor Totoro is my second. And that was another one I saw in theaters last year for the first time. I'm like trying to see all of them in theaters and just like weeping enough where I'm like, it's working through some things, which is nice.
That's how it feels, I think. Like, it's interesting. So again, I hadn't rewatched Kiki's in a really long time. And I think like watching it now as a 39-year-old with my professional witch life, it hit a little different. But for me, Spirited Away is the one. And I know it's like, in some ways, it's like the eye roll Miyazaki movie because everyone's like, everyone loves Spirited Away. But there's something about that. I really resonate with stories where the character is essentially like what you would call, I guess, in literature studies as like portal fiction, where somebody is like transported to a different world and then you have to learn the rules of the world and you have to kind of go on a sort of, to cite a Greek mythological term, but like catabasic journey where you descend into the underworld or into the alternate realm and you have to learn something and then come back out the other side. But
totally, it's Wizard of Oz and
right. Alice in Wonderland, that was my OG like archetypal story that I was obsessed with my entire life. And as witchcraft is in large part about working with spirits. So Spirited Away for me is like, whew. And I mean, I can't get even 3 seconds into that movie before I'm bawling my ass out. It's just like, it's imprinted upon my heart. Yeah. Whew.
No,
but Kiki's solid.
But yeah, I mean, Spirited Away is number 2 for me, if only just because, and what I think is brilliant about it is that like, there is something ultimately unknowable, like just on the frame of that movie where you're like, when it's the sixth station, and like that, whatever that is, it's like, I don't think I fully grasped that. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, is that like what magic is? Is that like understanding that there is something kind of outside the frame that you're trying to grasp at?
Yep. 100%. And I think that's why, well, I think that's why it hits for me so hard, that movie, because that is, especially when you're practicing magic regularly and you get really deep into it, beyond that surface level. And again, that's no shade to people who are not practicing kind of full time every day. That it's okay to be on the surface level, I think. But when you start really digging into the deep root of it, you realize that the lens that you're putting on the world and the way that you're engaging with reality, you're not going to get an answer. There's not going to be an answer. There's nothing at the end where someone's going to give you like the big rubber stamp and the gold star and be like, here it is. There's the explanation. And you have to be okay with that. And you have to learn to trust yourself. I do mediumship readings for people, and even I do them all the time, constantly. I've been doing it for years. But even now I'll be doing a session and I'll hear something or I'll see something, and there's that tiny doubt in the back of my mind that's like, why would you say that? That makes no sense. Why would you tell this client right now, like, frozen peas or bread? What the fuck is that? And you self-censor because you're like, this can't be real. Like, what am I, like, I'm just making this up. But then you'll say it or you'll do it or you'll trust the process and you'll get some degree of validation whereby you're like, oh, I'm tapping into something. But like you said, as in Spirited Away, am I ever going to have a full picture of this or the full context? Probably not. And I just have to be okay with that. It's an overused term now, but like the life of the witch is a liminal experience.
Ooh.
So.
Wow. But I mean, and I think that's very, I mean, the more, and especially I've interviewed tons of scientists, I mean, that is the sort of, and why what's the right word for it? I like really admire this idea that your efforts are a cumulative effort and you may never actually see the results of your work. You could be, a recent guest, Elise Fox, who's a mathematician, a math scientist,
so cool.
and a fish scientist and mathematician. And their job is to count the fish in the Great Barrier Reef. Like, that's her job.
Wow.
And it's an amazing job. It's so cool. But it's like one of those things where it's like, you are part of this larger thing, and to sort of not have faith in that, but like know that you're doing something that is like pushing things forward feels a little magical in some ways.
100%. I mean, there was a time where science and magic were not different. They were the same thing. And I personally, controversial opinion, but I still think they're not different. I think they are two sides of the same coin. I think what we call magic or psychic ability or even to some degree witchcraft, like, it is just mechanisms of understanding the universe or engaging with the universe that we don't have quantifiable data for yet. But give it 100 years, 200 years, we're gonna solve it to some degree. Yeah. But I think that even when we solve it, there's going to be a greater question behind the question, and I would imagine that scientists oftentimes say the same thing. Like, we understand a bit, we don't understand the totality. There is always going to be more. And I think that's beautiful. I've come to the point where I'm like, I don't need a concrete answer. I can have it be, we know what we know. We know inside this little bubble of data or experience, and there's always going to be something greater outside the bubble. And I think a lot of these witch movies, even the really wholesome, like whimsical ones, I think they kind of hit on that too. It's like, you don't get a lot of that content that is in a hurry to over-explain itself. The mystery is still there, and you're asked to enter the world of these, fantastical universes and just accept, okay, well, this is a thing. This is a thing that happens. The witches in practical magic can do these things. Why can they do them? We don't know.
Yeah, I love my favorite little detail all the time is that Sandra Bullock is stirring her tea or coffee. And it's never like, I feel like they never, moments where like she notices the Aidan Quinn like notices that she's doing it, she like puts her hand over it, but it's like there's never a scene of like literally her, like, I think Nicole Kidman at some point is just like, her sister doesn't realize how or like, I'm always been jealous, or like you don't know how much power you have, but it's not like they never literally it's never, I don't know. It's just, you could imagine in a modern movie, and I didn't realize this was like perfect. Like the sequel to Practical Magic is coming out this year in September.
I heard this.
So,
I know.
But like, it's one of those things where I just like that little detail in the movie, that there is this kind of like everyday stuff that feels mundane, but is kind of just a heightened. It's almost like the movie lets you notice it first, without telling you. So then you feel like, oh, what else is going on, and like what else is going on in my life, or like what are the things that there's like I don't have an awareness of.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big part of practice. I just got in the mail this book. I think it's called Mundane Magic. I think that's what it is. And I can't remember the author's name. That's terrible of me, but it's incredible. Essentially it's just a little book by my friend Molly. And it talks about how to introduce like a tiny bit of magic and intentionality, into your literal everyday normal tasks. There's chapters on how to it goes room by room. So there's chapters on like, how do you declutter your office, and how can you bring sort of magic into that? But I think that's part of it. The mundane and the magical are not these completely disparate, separate realms. They intersect with each other. And if there was one thing that I would, want newer practitioners to take away from their practice, is like, it really doesn't have to be these two separate sides of your life that you keep like never the twain shall meet, or you have to worry like, oh, maybe I'm not a witch because like I have to spend half my time at my like retail job, or cleaning my floors, whatever it might be, feeding my cat. It's integrative, and I think that is the beautiful thing about even shows like Sabrina, the 90s Sabrina, but also the remake. Like, this is a girl who is living a normal teenage life. She has this secret witchcraft side of her personality, or side of her life, but she has to integrate them. It's the integration of those two things, so that it's not this sort of difficult to balance separation. She has to figure out how do we merge these two sides.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like to really practice,
That's cool. I mean,
did you rewatch any Sabrina? Did you wind up doing it?
No, I didn't. But I mean, I watched a lot of it for the Percast. But I just love like, I mean, I feel like that was the whole show, was like things happening, and then her having to like deal with the magic in her, going into her high school, or like again, Salem Sabrina. And it's so
funny. It must be like, the algorithm listens to us at this point. We all know that's happening. But I opened my phone this morning, and one of the first things that I saw was one of those, 90s flashback reels that everyone's doing. I saw that you did yours the other day, which was really funny. But Melissa Joan Hart had done one. And it was all just her talking about like missing the puppet Salem, and I was like,
oh wait, I haven't seen that. That's so funny.
Oh my god, you have to go look. It's so cute. She's just like, I miss him, and it's just like the bedraggled looking.
Yeah,
like,
no, it was always so
clearly
obvious when it would turn into a real cat, and then it would turn back into the puppet. No, I was going to say, I just really like the end of Practical Magic, where part of it, when they eventually exorcise the villain, the main demon guy vampire, that like it ends with them like, even though there's all this magic, it's literally them just like sweeping the ashes out. Like, I just like there's just so many brilliant, like, it was funny because I went back and like, and it was like, oh, people didn't like this movie when it came out.
Really?
And it was just because it was like, they felt like the tonal whiplash of it. But I feel like that's just more, but that's the reality we live in. I feel like the meme is going around right now of like posting your art, posting a horrible thing going on in the world. Like, we live in tonal whiplash. Like, that's real life. And so to me, this movie didn't, I mean, I understand what they were saying, but I'm like, that's the charm of the movie. Like, I do like that there's this like powerful, the women coming together at the end of the neighborhood from a phone tree to then like getting to do witchcraft. And then like at the end, they're like, okay, let's just like sweep this fucker out of here, like.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like, that's a big part of the reality of witchcraft, even though a lot of these movies, especially from the 90s, are like to some degree a little bit sensational, but like, that's how it is, biggest witchcraft tip I could give anybody is like, you got to keep your house clean, dead ass. Like, and if you can't, I guess you have to hire a cleaner to do it for you, and just make sure you tell them that you have a frog in the fridge. Otherwise they're going to look at you weird. But, it's energy clusters. And when we live in environments that are unhealthy, whether that's, physically unhealthy because we're struggling. I mean, no judgment, chronic illness, cannot keep up with the cleaning myself, but whether it's physically unhealthy for those reasons or unhealthy because you have a lot of mental stress going on, or, toxicity that you're absorbing from relationships or whatever else. But it's hard to do what you need to do and function to your highest capacity when you're dealing with that stuff. And a big part of magic is about caretaking those things, just like any spiritual practice. The danger, of course, is when we take that too far and we start telling people that they can't be spiritual because, if you've ever had a head cold, then you must be cursed or whatever. We're not going to do that.
Okay.
In life. So thank you.
Celeste, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on the pod and telling me more about your own journey and goofing around about these 90s witch movies.
Thank you so much. I feel like, there's I don't know. Now I want to just go off and watch an entire day of Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
That's what I literally was like, should I buy the whole series? Yeah, why not? Because it's streaming on Tubi and stuff. No, well, I right now there's an Amazon discount if you just buy the whole series. So it's actually cheaper than buying all 7 seasons. So I was
hell
whatever.
Yeah.
So
that's the comfort thing to put on in the background when you're cleaning or when you're, playing with the cats, just marathon some 90s Sabrina.
I'm like, look at your ancestor.
Look at him.
Wait, don't learn from him. He was a scamp and he tried to take over the world. Okay, never mind.
He did. I forgot about that plot line. So good.
There's a great It's Only Salem screen grabs on Instagram that I follow. It just makes my day.
So
it just brightens
good.
My life whenever I come across them. I feel like maybe it was for International Women's Day. It was like, you're not a witch, you're a dragon. And I'm just
my God, I love it. What an inspo. An inspo.
Especially the bad puppet. That's the one we have to hold in high regard. Where can people follow you, find you? Inquire about your services if you're, all that good stuff.
On the astral plane. No. So I have a website, celestemott.com, that has links to book sessions with me, and I have classes and stuff like that. But other than that, I do most of my random posting and yapping to the camera at TikTok and Instagram. So I'm at Celeste Mott, M-O-T-T, on Instagram, and at Celeste Moth on TikTok. And I do have a Substack. If you're someone who's more interested in thoughtful, nuanced, long-form takes, which I know are unpopular in today's society, but I am, my agent is cracking the whip, and she's like, you got to make people subscribe to your Substack. So on Substack, I am also Celeste Mott. Cool. And I talk about all sorts of stuff, including 90s and Y2K nostalgia. So head on over.
Oh, I love it. Also, it's so funny. This has been sitting on my desk for a year. I bought these Agatha tarot cards.
I see. I need to watch that too. There's so many witch shows that I need to.
That feels very indebted to all the 90s stuff because it is very,
I bet. That's what I've heard.
Again,
I heard it was good. I heard it was really good.
It's really good. I mean, I love WandaVision, but I'd say Agatha is the best Marvel TV show since that. So obviously, and Catherine Hahn is just, the best. But
I gotta do it.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been so great. Steve Ray Morse and all the things, patreon.com. I mean, if you're witches with some margaritas, please invite me over. So
yeah, I gotta come to LA. I'll do non-alcoholic margarita and we'll just get you drunk. It'll be great.
Yes. Thanks everybody. And yeah, I mean, look, if you're gonna go to a new town, I mean, you know what? Pick the town, because eventually you'll rescue an adorable boy from a Zeppelin crashing into a clock tower. But
who needs Tinder when you can rescue a boy from a Zeppelin?
Bye, everybody.